So I'm joined by Peter Crump and Meg Heffron. You two have the, not dubious, but the distinction of actually saying you were going to talk about one thing in your presentation and changing it and not telling anyone. Why the change?
It was a total hijack.
It was a hijack.
We looked at the paper and thought, what can we do with pensions? And then as we started to think, we went deeper and deeper in the one hole and realised that the issue of using pensions to fund for old age and address the longevity problem was exciting enough in its own right to focus only on that.
Okay, and so that was fine? That everyone was happy with that?
Well, I think it meant we ended up focusing on probably a more important issue.
Yeah.
And in a conference like this, there's always a lot of good technical material on the basics of tax planning, estate planning, and there were a lot of other sessions on that.
Okay.
Whereas there's probably not a lot of scope to talk about something completely different.
So with pensions, are we forgetting about pensions? Is it something that, like, maybe as we all get older, we're going, oh, I don't want to talk about it, or?
Well, what are pensions? Pensions is just a state of play in the superannuation system. Once you reach age 55 at the moment, you can convert some or all of your super to pension. Yeah. And it's a means where you can start to draw money out.
Okay. But then are we not talking about pensions because it's a difficult thing to talk about, or?
No. I think, in fact, in our session, we would probably pitch pensions as being the perfect way to help handle the longevity issue.
Yeah.
It's more around how you control the pension. So our whole session was really around, we can't solve the problem perfectly. There's no risk-free solution to making sure you have enough money to live for very old age. But we can probably do a lot in terms of client education, and tweaking how we use pensions in an SMSF is probably a great starting point for that.
Okay, well, let's talk about the definition of old age and when pensions kick in. So Peter, you said 55 you can begin, but when you talk about old age, what are we talking?
Well, we tend to, when we talk of old age, 85 is a benchmark that's quite often used.
Okay.
My 97-year-old grandmother doesn't agree.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of tweets from Liam Short and I think someone from class saying that, I shouldn't say that, should I? I saw a lot of tweets.
So what's your grandma, 97?
Yeah.
Right.
And I saw a couple of tweets from Liam Short saying much the same thing, that his mother-in-law was upsetting our actuarial tables. But certainly we picked 85 as a sort of cutover point because that's around normal life expectancy.
Okay.
So if you're one of the lucky half of the population that lives beyond that time, you're probably heading into old age territory.
It sounds like a good issue to have, but we are living longer, aren't we? Which is a problem for us financially.
Well, Peter would know more about that, being a lot closer to 85 than I am.
Yes, closer to the expected age of death being a male as well, Meg, but if you want to look at it that way. But we are living longer, and that's exciting to think about, that at the turn of the century, when a 65-year-old retired, they had an expectation of living for perhaps 12 more months if they were lucky. Whereas now a person at age 65 has an expectation of hanging around for potentially another 20, 25 years.
And actually that point highlights exactly why this is so relevant now and hasn't been in the past, because turn of the century, 1900 was around when the age pension was introduced. So if you think about it, when the age pension was introduced in 1900, most people were dead before or soon after they started getting the age pension, whereas now they're going to live for another 20 years.
Yeah, and your hope obviously is that people learn and find a way to run their own pensions as opposed to relying on the system to give themselves a better, older age. Is that right?
Well, that's very important. My younger colleague here is likely to benefit more from the compulsory superannuation system than I will, because that is one of the three pillars of the Australian retirement income system. We have the compulsory system, which is super guarantee. We have the public system, which is the age pension, and then the voluntary system, where people put their own money in to take advantage of the tax opportunities. So those in combination will be enough to support a person in retirement. The question is whether they want to have a good retirement or an indifferent retirement and not take care of funding for the future.
And the key point in our paper was, we'll all have this problem, and there are a number of different solutions we might employ to try and solve it. And in fact, most people probably employ a combination. I wonder if by the time my demographic gets to 65, it'll be routine to put at least some of their super in an annuity or a deferred annuity. But I guess a lot of us are going to have, hopefully, substantial sums in our SMSF. And what we were really trying to do with our session was give some ideas on how we could use that vehicle in and of itself to help manage this problem. Because it's really, it's largely around education. It's largely around a client understanding that if they keep spending at their current rate, they'll run out at 90.
Yep.
If they expect to live beyond that, they need to rein in current expenditure. Or expect to experience a massive drop-off in income at some point.
Okay, and how hard is that discussion to have with your clientele? I mean,
it's getting easier because in the self-managed super fund area, one of the key values that these people have is they want to be involved in their own investment. They want to be involved in their own fund. So we're a large part of the way there because they're engaged. What we need to do now is get the message out there to say, well, it's also about understanding what you're going to be doing with this money when you stop adding to it and when it starts to gradually be drawn against.
okay, and I know there's no sort of blanket rule, but is there a sort of a time when in the life of a self-managed super fund where you start, or an age where you start going, so this is the point where you stop accumulating and start preserving, or like, you know, what age do you start having that discussion with trustees?
It probably would be at least 10 years out from the nebulous retirement date.
So 50, 55?
50, 55, you need to start to say, I'm getting serious about whether I have enough or not.
Yep.
Because 2 years out from retirement, it's a bit late to ramp it up. We
Yep.
don't have very generous contribution limits to be able to push money in a tax-deductible manner. And remember too that 10 years out from this nebulous retirement age, what will retirement age be in 10 years' time?
Right, I don't know. No one knows really, do they?
No, but they don't. And can I just add one more point to what Peter was just saying then? The profile of the typical SMSF member is going to change radically in the next little while. So the current crop of today's 90-year-olds don't have SMSFs. So when they think about making sure they've got enough money to last for the rest of their lives, they're not thinking in the context of pensions in SMSFs, they're thinking in the context of their external assets. Today's 70-year-olds do have SMSFs, and a lot of them have a lot of money because they didn't have the same contribution cap restraints that today's 40 and 50-year-olds have.
Yeah.
Now, what today's 40 and 50-year-olds have is a really interesting environment where they've had compulsory super for most of their working lives. Their super balances today are quite possibly bigger than their parents were at the same time, but their ability to really ramp it up just before retirement is totally different to their parents. So I wonder if that conversation Peter's talking about, I think it will start, say, 10 years before retirement, whereas I think for the current crop of retirees, it maybe hasn't happened yet.
Okay. And also they want to still go with that asset accumulation as well as a sort of a background buffer. And
They're still looking to put as much in as they can, but of course once you reach age 65 and you're not working, you're not able to put any more in. You're not obliged to draw money out if you've got sufficient money outside.
Okay.
But still, how they invest is another important part of the consideration, because just because you reach a milestone age doesn't mean that the reason the money's there has changed.
Okay. And how important is SPAA in this conference for you guys in getting, you know, the right message out there to trustees and advisors?
Well, SPA's role is to ensure that the professional advisors understand the issues, and they can then pass that information on to their trustee clients.
Okay.
So the role of SPAA is to ensure that the message about the important things that need to be considered, not just today but tomorrow, are on the table so that we can understand them and be of value.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to say, Andrew, your old age is a long way off.
I'm officially...
You've got the least hair, though.
Not if you count the stuff on my back. I just became increasingly nervous throughout the conversation, going, you know, like I'm nearly 50, so it's like nearly time to
start getting serious about life for a change.
I know. And I was wondering whether you were going to start laughing when you were talking about 50, because how close to 50 are you?
Does it matter?
Yeah, because I think that's the thing. That's part of the discussion, is that for all this time we all just were having a good time, but now it's actually getting serious. So that's why I asked the question of when, you know, how hard is it to have the discussion with people? because suddenly it goes from we're just having a lark to, you know, what actually are you going to do?
You mean there's a
with the
purpose
rest
for
of
this
your
thing
life?
after all?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
And I think I guess where the discussion changes is from how can we help you minimise your tax and get as much as possible
Yeah.
into the system, into, right, well, the end is nigh.
Yeah.
There's going to come a point where you can't put any more in. Let's just reset here and decide whether you've got enough.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to that conversation myself.
No, okay, good. Well, thanks. I'm glad. Sister. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.